Okay, well, let's get started. Again, hello everyone. Welcome to the webinar, Adapting Your Organization to Office 365, hosted by ARC Business Solutions. My name is Mike Denowden. I'm the Business Development Director with ARC Business Solutions. First of all, I want to welcome all the people on the line. I know everyone's schedules are extremely busy, and we truly appreciate you taking the time to review our presentation. And today's webinar was really created from the Office 365 project that we completed with the Real Estate Council of Alberta. So a few housekeeping items today. When you logged on to the webinar, your phones were muted and your audio was muted, and they will remain muted for the portion of the webinar. If you do wish to ask a question, simply type it in at the bottom of your panel and we will address that at the end. And today's presentation is 1 hour, so 45 minutes approximately for the presentation, and 15 minutes at the end for questions and answers. So we are tackling 4 objectives today with the webinar. First and foremost is, how can an organization leverage Office 365 to improve staff engagement? This is really a piece of technology, and it's really used to improve staff engagement, so we'll definitely learn that today. And more importantly, why did the Real Estate Council of Alberta decide to use Office 365? There are other systems out there in the marketplace, so we will review that. Third is the approaches for company-wide implementation of Office 365, SharePoint, and Microsoft Teams. This is really the training component, but also change management, and we'll definitely review that as well because that's very important. And last but certainly not least is cloud security and compliance implications when it comes to a project. So any project should actually have these in mind, but we will address that here today. So our hosts today, well, myself, again, my name is Mike Denowden. I'm Business Development Director with ARC Business Solutions. Very proud to say that I've been with ARC for over 11 years. I manage our Saskatchewan region with our Regina office, and I also manage strategic accounts in Calgary. And joining us here today is Zeke.
Thanks, Mike. I'm Zeke Irabar, Manager of Business Productivity Solutions at ARC Business Solutions. I've been working with SharePoint products since, well, before they were called SharePoint, which has sort of naturally shifted into an emphasis on implementing solutions using the Office 365 Cloud Productivity Suite of applications and stuff.
Thanks, Zeke. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Stefan Moroniak. I'm the IT Manager at the Real Estate Council of Alberta. I've been with the Real Estate Council, also known as RECA, for 8 years. And I'm just excited to be here to share some of the experiences we had on the project.
All right, thanks, guys. So we wanted to take a moment just to describe ARC Business Solutions and RECA. So some of you may be familiar with ARC Business Solutions and some may not, and we just wanted to make a quick explanation of who we are as a company. So ARC Business Solutions, we are an IT consulting company. We have offices in Edmonton, which is our head office, Calgary, Regina, Toronto, and also in Nevada, USA. Within our offering, we have a number of different divisions or practices that we bring to the marketplace. And first and foremost is our solution delivery. Whether our clients are looking for technology or applications, we can bring that into the marketplace with our staff, ranging from project managers, developers, testers, trainers, etc. And we can execute these projects with our project management methodology called delivery management methodology, or we can simply adapt to the methodologies of our clients, whether it's waterfall or agile. Our second managing division is our managed services area. So we cater more to small to mid-sized organizations that view IT not full-time, so we can augment that with our managed services area. Our network operations center is in Edmonton, so we can do remote monitoring or remote assessments. Or if it need be, we can dispatch with our certified technicians, all bringing end-to-end coverage for our clients with predictable costs. Our third operating division is our mobile solution area, and this division has actually seen a tremendous amount of growth over the last number of years. We bring market-ready products into the marketplace, whether they can be downloaded by the at the Google Play Store or the Apple Play Store, or we can do custom development. We can bring in our people to understand the requirements of our organization and bring enterprise-class solutions on the iOS platform, Android, and the Windows platform. And lastly is our enterprise information management area. And it's really this area that started this webinar with the good partnerships that we have. We have partnerships with OpenText, so we can bring Documentum and Captiva solutions into the marketplace, but more importantly, we have partnerships with Microsoft, bringing in Office 365, SharePoint, et cetera, with those technologies. So very proud to have that partnership. And joining us today is the Real Estate Council of Alberta. The Real Estate Council of Alberta is the governing body for Alberta real estate brokerage, mortgage brokers, property management, and real estate appraisal professionals. Currently, there's over 15,000 of these professionals practicing within Alberta. But joining us is Stefan, so he's going to explain a little bit more. Stefan?
Thanks, Mike. RECA is committed to the public interest by promoting the integrity of the industry. We do that through education programs. I'm pleased to share that we have titans of industry as practice advisors. And so part of our mandate is to ensure that we are promoting professionalism in the industry. We're a nonprofit organization with a self-regulated industry. We have 12 council members that provide us direction for regulation. We have 75 staff members that provide regulatory services and education programs to industry professionals. If you want to learn more, check us out on www.reca.ca.
Thanks, Stefan. So before we kind of get into what the project entailed and the challenges and lessons learned, we wanted to have Zeke describe simply what is Office 365, because there could be several different definitions. So Zeke, take it away.
Thanks, Mike. For a lot of you on the line, this might be some repetition, but for some of you, this might actually be new information. At a high level, Office 365 is a cloud productivity suite of applications, and really the core tenet of Office 365 is to work with anyone from anywhere on any device in a secure and compliant fashion. One of the brilliant things that Office 365 allows you to do is promote this concept of a single source of truth for our content or our conversations. We've all been in the past filing fiasco where we take a document, we make some changes, we attach it to an email, send it to two other collaborators, they make their changes, rename the files, send them back, and then we're responsible for refiling that, and we might file it incorrectly. And this is something we saw even with other Microsoft information management products such as SharePoint on-prem. And what you're doing with that behavior is you're creating multiple versions of the truth. Next thing you know, you don't have the latest and greatest of that procedure, that policy, or that guideline, which down the road can turn into expensive fines, repeated work, or just wasted time in general. Another great thing with Office 365 is the ability, depending on your licensing, to essentially manage your security and compliance posture. I won't get too much into that because Steph actually has some pretty cool use cases at RECA regarding security and compliance in Office 365. So what components make up Office 365? I've highlighted some of the key players. SharePoint, obviously, is used for information records management. It has a long lineage of products and versions leading up to SharePoint Online, and it is truly best in breed for those functions, including its search. You have OneDrive, which is personal file storage in the cloud, also known as OneDrive for Business, where every individual who's licensed at the organization has 1 terabyte of storage for their personal files at work. And then you have what Microsoft is calling the Power Platform, so Flow, Power Apps, Power BI, and SharePoint's kind of an extension of those. And these are great low or no-code solution builders that your business analysts, your citizen developers, or even your developers can use to build process automation, mobile applications, or once again, best-in-breed dashboards for your organization. And lastly, the one we're going to be focusing on a lot in this presentation is Teams, which kind of ties all of those and more into a single hub for communications and collaboration. So let's get into the project itself. Before RECA even considered any technologies or vendors, it identified that it had a handful of problems it needed to solve. Number one was low staff engagement, utilizing a very dated company intranet. So they did have a intranet portal hosted on SharePoint 2013, but much like the intranet portal at a lot of organizations, it was fairly vanilla. It was fairly static. They had a video that rotated every week or so. But for the most part, people were only using it as a landing portal for things that were just more interesting. So procedures, policies, guidelines they needed, or perhaps links to other sub-sites. It was just a glorified bookmarks page at that point. And RECA's not alone in that. We've seen that with a number of organizations, small, medium, and large, where they have these intranet portals that aren't actually being used to engage their staff. Limited searchability and records management capabilities, once again, because they were using older versions of on-prem tools, and they were running quite lean in IT, they weren't able to keep up to date with the latest and greatest out there for RM, for searchability, which is why they started, leaning towards more of a cloud productivity solution. The world is definitely filled with cybersecurity headlines. This is especially top of mind over the past month or so, where we've seen, I think every week there's a new Windows 10 breach that we need to patch, an O-Day exploit that we need to get ahead of. And think of your server patching, your server upkeep, and those other operational costs that, once again, are very difficult to keep up with in a smaller organization.
That's right, Zeke. I kind of think of some of the headlines that we're seeing around cybersecurity. City of Baltimore ransomware attack. This started with Marriott leak. Recently, Capital One, which I was a victim of that one. I mean, last year we even had vulnerabilities in the hardware level, x86 architecture with Spectre meltdown. And so as professionals, it's important for us to keep our customer information well protected. For us, confidentiality, integrity, and access, those are really the key pillars for us to keep information protected. Over the last year, we've kind of gone into a transition to our final year in the business plan. We've done so much good work at RECA. One of the projects I like to highlight to people in that business plan is the RECA building, which is a shining star, and I'm very proud of that one. We also have just a lot of projects in that business plan, just a plethora of projects and initiatives, especially around consumer protection. And for us, we look at people, process, and technology when we're evaluating these projects. We want to make sure that we have the right people and the right fit in terms of the solution when it comes to something like this, like a digital transformation. We also need software tools that makes it a bit easier for us to coordinate and communicate across the organization for these projects. We want to avoid silos and making decisions in vacuums. And that's kind of where I see Office 365 as a real star in terms of collaboration. So here are some of the reasons why we chose Office 365. So really, alignment when it comes to strategy was really key for us in our decision-making process. I'll talk a little bit more around business resiliency and information security. Also, Canadian data residency, storing the information in, I guess it's Toronto Data Center, and I think the backup's in Quebec City. That's really key. But I guess the information in transit isn't necessarily always going to be in Canada. Is that right, Zeke?
That's correct. Something that we actually, I think, jointly identified during the project, even if you have a requirement to have your data in transit within Canadian data centers, keep in mind when you're integrating with a third party, especially a Teams bot or a SharePoint add-in, that in many cases, they might be making external web service calls that's actually sending that data to a server hosted outside of Canada before it comes back. So just something to keep top of mind when discussing data residency.
And for us, that's an acceptable risk. For us, it's really about the permanent storage of the information. Change management, of course, is going to be a challenge on any type of project. For us, we looked at Google G Suite and making that jump, but we wanted to keep the Office Outlook experience specifically, and we wanted to make sure that our staff, our customers, have that same experience, but when it comes to change management, it's really using more of the collaboration tools in Office 365. We also want the solution to have business value for the future. We want to see it as a technology platform and an asset. And the software maintainability. So how sustainable, how much cost is this going to cost the organization once we start putting operational processes into the technology? And really people. We have partners that support us, multiple partners that are offering Office 365 services. So it made a lot of sense for us because of the people around us. And of course, accessibility balanced with security. We're really now pushing our information into a more accessible manner, and now that we're transitioning to the cloud, what are the security implications that go with that? So at a high level, here's the project scope. We have 3 phases. Phase 1 was really about the initial setup of the Microsoft Office tenant. And when I say tenant, it's really just the company site, and the adoption of collaboration tools. Phase 2 is really going to be about records management. Right now, we're working with another partner on our cybersecurity program. We're developing an information asset inventory. We really want to get our data governance ducks in a row, information security classification as part of that, same with records retention. We just want to make sure we have all that information set up with the assets identified before we go into phase 2. That's coming up in our next fiscal year. And then finally, phase 3 is going to be about reporting. And we're talking a little bit about Power BI, so we want to be able to set up the reporting and the insights and the measures once we have the information in play. But for this particular project, it was really about setting up communication services, migrating email, and adopting collaboration tools and making it secure. Zeke?
Yeah, I just had to tag on to that actually. What we're looking at with Steph's project scope here is actually probably a boilerplate project scope you'll want to consider for your Office 365 rollouts. And this is in fact one that we execute with other clients as well. We definitely don't recommend tackling phases 1 and 2 at the same time. What you'll do typically is just introduce change fatigue amongst your staff if you try to introduce brand new tools and technologies, and then on top of that say, hey, by the way, you now need to populate these fields and route your documents to this records repository. It's just too much at once. Start with phase 2, hit phase 3, start with phase 1, hit phase 2, then hit phase 3. And what's neat about this is it actually kind of organically flows through the product stack in Office 365. You know, phase 1, you're setting up perhaps an intranet portal on SharePoint Online, you're rolling out Teams and corresponding SharePoint sites behind the scenes. Phase 2, you might be leveraging Power Apps and Flow to handle the document routing and to handle maybe the automation of some of those metadata properties you're rolling out through your global taxonomy. And then phase 3, you're using tools such as Power BI to actually provide some of that business intelligence. So just a really great way of going about that stuff.
Thanks, Steve. So at a high level, this is our project timeline. Before December, we were doing our due diligence process. ARC won the competition through an RFP process, but December was primarily initial planning, getting the agreement signed and that sort of thing. January was when we kicked off the project. We had an initial setup of the Office 365 tenant. We made some decisions around how we're going to do single sign-on authentication, and we selected the hybrid exchange configuration. And this might be applicable for other organizations, but we just have a lot of on-prem enterprise applications that rely on the on-prem mail relay. And so for us, it made sense. It was the path of least resistance. In February, we selected the Microsoft 365 A5 licensing because we are an academic institute. We went with A5. For others, the equivalent would be E5. And also part of this month was really to upgrade our Microsoft Office clients. So we saw a lot of clients go from 2016 to Office 365. Some of the challenges we had there was third-party plugins into whether it's Word or Outlook. And some of the lessons learned were the compatibility mode for those plugins is really key to make sure you're using Office 365, the client version. And there's some real good benefits for that from a security perspective. We also migrated email services in February as well and started the development of the new intranet, RECA Live. We started training in March, implemented two-factor authentication, which is a really key area for us in terms of security. We also installed Windows Defender ATP, Advanced Threat Protection, Endpoint Protection on our clients. April, we moved to data loss protection policies going into play. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. And we launched RECA Live, and it was an Easter theme. And really, our champions were our communication services team, Zeke and other ARC consultants. Really big moment for us and the organization launching this new company portal. We also launched Microsoft Teams, primarily as a pilot for some of the business groups and projects. And we also implemented mobile device management on smartphones. This is done through Intune, and there are really specific configurations for that. I will mention that RECA isn't really BYOD, so these are smartphones on company assets. Finally, we had kind of a lull period in May as the IT team is working on other things, but with June, with the final transition to operations and project closeout of phase 1. So here are some of the project challenges we had. In terms of change management, again, we stuck with the Office and the Outlook experience, which was really key for change management. But we did try to push our staff and our customers to tools like RECA Live, Yammer, Teams, and OneDrive. And really, we just started our journey with OneDrive Business. Zeke, the feedback on OneDrive has been very positive, and really, it's really nice to have those records management capabilities using the Explorer view, which everyone is so familiar with.
Right.
It's important to have also data loss protection policies set up before you start introducing OneDrive, because there's so much power in terms of being able to share sensitive information. And so for us, what we call DLP policies was really key. Due diligence took us a little while. We are a regulator, so due diligence tends to take a while. So this is really the RFP process, vendor selection, but we also did a fairly in-depth privacy review. And our privacy officers that are awesome, they identified key risks associated with Microsoft's North American licensing agreements around governing law, data transfer, limits of liability. So we accepted those risks as we presented them to our executive sponsor, and more broadly, just the use of the cloud as an organization was a risk that we accepted. Information security policies were also impacted, so we had to update our acceptable use policy, information security classification, and really policies around remote access, teleworking, that sort of thing. Configuration management, for all my IT colleagues on the call today, there's a lot of configuration in Office 365. Be prepared for that. It's a challenge, and for us, for my team, small team, we're dealing with change controls and making sure that we communicate with our stakeholders anytime we have an impact from a configuration change. And finally, we have limited IT resources, so we're doing multiple projects during the course of this time frame. And of course, I have a very good team. I'm very blessed. We call them the Fantastic Four. They punch way above their weight category. But I'm also very lucky to have local partners to augment our staff. And so without ARC, we wouldn't be able to do this type of project. So our focus with our IT staff, just so everyone's aware, it's really about the infrastructure support, the on-premise enterprise application support, data center operations, and building security. Our strategy is always to augment our staff when we execute on projects like this. And projects like this must align with the business plan and with other programs to make sure that they have the visibility with our senior leadership.
All right. Thanks, Steph, for the context around the business side of things. So Steph went a little bit into the why and at a high level the how. Let's drill down a little bit into that how and sort of explain our thought process and our methodology at ARC while working with RECA on this project. As we mentioned a couple of times, RECA Live, their intranet portal was fairly vanilla. It was hosted on SharePoint 2013, had a couple of web parts that had a video that rotated every month, But for the most part, it was a launch pad to other sites. It was a glorified bookmarks page for staff. So we determined that one of the best ways to start drumming up excitement for some of these new features, OneDrive, Teams, and SharePoint Online, was to overhaul RECA Live in SharePoint Online, and then piggyback that to start announcing those rollouts. So we worked with communications, who, by the way, were pivotal in this rollout, and they provided us a wireframe or a mock-up of what they thought their intranet portal should look like. And you'll notice it's very brand focused. It's representing RECA's brand, their font, their colors, and whatnot. And it's immersive. We have event roll-ups, announcement roll-ups, news roll-ups. We have a kudos box, employee spotlight, not pictured or some other social feed roll-ups and polls. They wanted a page that people actually wanted to come to, not just for bookmarks to other procedures, policies, guidelines, and sites. Now, obviously, if you look at this structure and you have some experience working with SharePoint Online, this poses some problems with the modern experience. In SharePoint Modern pages, unlike SharePoint Classic pages, the ones we're used to in older versions of SharePoint, it's a very on-rails experience. We don't have the flexibility to add the styling that RECA was looking for in their intranet portal. Now, we could have designed and developed something using the modern page out-of-box features that came somewhat close, but we wanted to go that extra mile. So what we did is we looked into some of the solutions out there that support SharePoint Online Modern pages. We decided that the intranet in a box type of solution was overkill for this. It's a smaller organization. We didn't need a full intranet overhaul. So we ended up going with a suite of components called SharePoint. SharePoint are SharePoint framework or SPFX-friendly web parts or components, whatever you want to call them, that you can add to your SharePoint Modern pages to enhance the look and feel of those pages. And they're quite powerful. They give you the ability to control the style rules, to inject JavaScript in a safe manner, unlike the atrocities we sometimes created on our older versions of SharePoint on the classic pages. And this is the end result. It actually looks quite close to the wireframe, I think, Steph. Did we hit it out of the park?
Absolutely.
Right.
It looks really good.
Yeah. So what we did, just at a glance here, I want to break down what we're using for all of this. And the beauty of this page is we're actually exposing individuals at RECA to these new tools without them even realizing it. Let's start with Yammer. Yammer is a source of confusion for almost every organization that decides to roll it out, small, medium, or large. And the reason for that is because typically the decision starts with, okay, we want Yammer, let's figure out where to put it. Well, in this case, we actually sort of went the other way. Okay, we want an interactive board where people can give kudos to staff, to other staff members. Well, let's use Yammer. Let's create a Yammer group. Let's throw in a little widget on the homepage, and let's have people use that to submit kudos. And I think it's actually been quite successful.
Absolutely. Yeah, actually, just the ability to give kudos to other staff in different departments really engages other staff to use the Yammer technology. And they don't even really realize they're using Yammer. They just want to put a kudos out there on RECA Live.
Precisely. And if down the road you do decide to start rolling out Yammer more holistically for global enterprise communication, they're now familiar with the product, and they weren't even aware of it.
Exactly.
Also on the page, you'll see that we have the interactive news roll-ups, the employee spotlight. All of these behind the scenes are just using the SharePoint Modern publishing pages. Events roll-ups, which are using the events calendar behind the scene. In fact, every roll-up you see on this page is pulling from out-of-box SharePoint lists and libraries. Now, another thing I want to highlight is, once again, communications, the communications team at RECA was pivotal to this rollout. Because we were rolling out the intranet portal around Easter, they decided to have sort of an Easter egg hunt, which actually drove people to the RECA Live intranet portal, and one of the tasks they had to do was actually submit a kudos in the kudos box, which I thought was a really neat way, once again, to sort of entice people or incentivize people into actually using the new tools.
And just a great way to engage stakeholders and get buy-in to use the technology.
Yep. Absolutely. So let's discuss the actual Teams rollout. Following the rollout of RECA Live, the intranet portal, as I mentioned, we sort of piggybacked that, dropping hints that this was coming. You're going to have a new communications and collaboration product to use on your desktops. First and foremost, before you even start considering rolling this out, you need to achieve that executive and leadership buy-in. I can't stress this enough. You need that excitement to trickle down from the top. Otherwise, the project will just fall on deaf ears. The next thing you'll want to do is align the internal IT staff and your communication staff or your human resources staff. Oftentimes, they sort of do two roles on what your approach will look like and also what your messaging is going to be. You need to make sure that the vendor, IT, and communications are all aligned on the messaging for this rollout. And that's going to require keeping sort of an open communications channel between staff, IT, and your HR or communications folks.
So Zeke, would you say step 2 is really about identifying your champions and getting them on board for the messaging and the approach?
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, the Microsoft guidance itself will have you identify your champions in each functional group, team, or department. And these will be the individuals who, within their groups, are going to be championing these products that you're rolling out. And this isn't really just specific to teams. It is sort of a methodology you'll want to use when rolling out anything that brings about the type of change management burden and expectations that this type of rollout does. Then you'll want to prep leadership and executive on your staged approach. What does this approach look like? Get their sign-off on how you plan on actually rolling this out. Then you'll want to pilot this staged approach within IT and your communications or human resources teams. And based on that pilot, make some adjustments here and there, pull some levers, push some buttons, and tweak it. And then finally, once you have that hardened approach, execute it per functional group or department or team, however you plan on rolling that out. And that's going to depend on the size of your organization. Cliche as it sounds, I just want to stress this once again, communication is paramount. Once again, without the communications team participation from the get-go of this project, I don't believe we would have been as successful as we were. From everything such as the Easter egg hunt to the RECA Live intranet portal rollout to the Yammer feed being used for kudos, we work hand in hand with IT at RECA and with the communications team to constantly provide that consistent messaging to the staff. One thing you'll also want to consider is having a dedicated communications channel between staff and between IT and HR or communications so that staff can actually reach out as you're rolling these technologies out, whether that's a shared mailbox or if you're using ServiceNow, perhaps a custom form specific to the rollout of Teams or of 365 to your organization. Finally, let's talk about the actual staged approach that we executed. And this is typically, once again, a boilerplate approach you'll probably want to execute on your rollouts. The first thing you're going to want to do is ensure you train your staff and train your champions, especially those champions. They need to become subject matter experts at the thing you're trying to roll out. They need to be able to field some of those basic questions from their teams and also sort of bring about that positive feedback as these tools are being used. At RECA, we actually ended up doing, I think, 9 or 10 training sessions.
I think it was 9.
9, yeah. So we hit the leadership, and we also trained every functional team within RECA individually. I personally recommend through ARC that we don't have classroom sessions that are more than 15, 20 people, because what will happen is you don't encourage that dialogue. You want people asking questions for two reasons. A, they just need to know. You don't want them using the tools, not having their questions answered during the training sessions, and then they just get lost, frustrated, or confused. And secondly, it gives you a feedback mechanism to tweak your training, to tweak your rollout going forward. It is sort of an iterative process as you're going through this. After the training, actually provision the product. At RECA, after we trained each functional group, we provisioned a team with a base set of channels. And Steph, actually, you came up with a pretty good analogy for channels within your organization. Yeah,
a lot of the folks at RECA are used to the folder structure in Explorer View. And we have these file shares based on the business unit. And it's those top-level folders that really show categories or different functions within a business unit or a team. We said those are really what your channels are when it comes to Microsoft Teams.
Yeah, that's a great example. For example, human resources, within that folder might have a recruitment folder, a roadshow folder, an interviews folder. Well, those may actually become your channels within Teams. So think of that as a good way to sort of explain what channels are, because they typically are a source of confusion for users as they get onboarded on Teams. After you've provisioned the product and you've installed it on their workstations, they've received the training, support them, right? Use those open feedback channels I mentioned under communication is key, and support these users. Make sure you're at their desk side, walking them through their issues. If you're seeing a pattern emerge amongst your users, maybe it's a common issue, put out a bulletin. Leverage your new intranet portal. Leverage your Yammer groups to actually put out those bulletins and say, look, we identified this issue, we're working on it, this is the workaround, so on and so forth. Lastly, migrate. And when I specify migrate, I don't necessarily mean, execute the full shebang, let's move everything from your file shares or your on-prem data stores into Teams. A good way to get users using the product is to get them used to not only using chat and conversations, but get them used to using the files feature within Teams, so the actual content management within the product. And a good way to do this is to take maybe single documents, a workbook, a policy, a procedure, a guideline, something that they use frequently, maybe that isn't super business critical, and move that into Teams. Set the old location to read only or just rename the file, and have them try working with that document out of Teams, just once again, so they can familiarize themselves with the product and how to actually use that. And I'd just like to pass it back to Steph to discuss some more business context around the Office 365 features.
Thanks, Zeke. I just wanted to take a moment to go through really this balance between accessibility and security when you're adopting Microsoft Teams, or Office 365, I should say. And that brings us to Teams. So Teams is a fantastic tool. We see Microsoft Teams as kind of a technology to solve this cross-functional communication barrier. We're leveraging Teams at RECA for project coordination, communication on software development projects, business units, leadership meetings, education development, cybersecurity program, and much more. Zeke, I'm a fan of Microsoft Planner and Planner Hub. To be able to do effective task management has been really key for our adoption. And I'm excited to see the modern files experience ideally later this year. I'm not sure exactly when Microsoft will be launching it. The one key area that I think Microsoft should improve on is really to be able to show us records management capabilities in Teams as part of the modern experience.
Right, and just to piggyback off of that, that's a good point. So they actually were supposed to have the new files experience out this year. I think they're still working on it. What Steph is mentioning there is that if you have custom metadata, maybe you're coming from an existing taxonomy implemented in an on-prem version of SharePoint, it's currently not being surfaced properly in the files experience in Teams. That will be coming to the product, though. As a stopgap, what you can do is you can actually just enable the automatic application of your metadata properties behind the scenes in the underlying SharePoint online site.
Just a quick story about Microsoft Teams. Our IT team conducted a mock disaster recovery event this summer. Our mock event was a gas leak in the RECA building, and staff were not able to access the building. And just to be clear, this is a mock DR event. RECA was still open for business. This is just the IT team going through conducting the technology recovery plan. And for us, the technology made us much more effective in achieving our recovery time objectives. I could coordinate with staff in different locations, some in the data center, some at alternate site 1. And so I'm a fan of this type of technology to be able to, not only make those check marks happen on the plan, but also to be able to coordinate with the team in terms of the recovery time. This is really added to our business resiliency program. So I also want to talk about security. This is a screenshot of Security Compliance Portal. And securing your information, as we said, is really vital. The Security and Compliance Portal is really a comprehensive set of tools Things like threat management is in there. We mentioned data loss prevention policies, mail flow insights, data privacy, e-discovery. Those are the type of tools that you should be aware of, and this is really included in our A5, equivalent to E5 licensing, having access to this particular portal. And when we start moving files in there, we're going to get a lot more familiar with the information security classification and data governance piece. I also wanted to highlight the Microsoft Cloud App Security Portal. This is a real key portal for us. I actually, from my background, I'm very familiar with Microsoft Service Center Operations Manager, or SCOM. It feels like the Microsoft Cloud App Security has roots in SCOM. But what I really like about it in terms of the alerts, it allows you to have that visibility to know what's going on with your tenant. And so some of the alerts I've been exposed to, one of them is impossible travel alert. We have a situation where we have staff that's authenticated successfully in Calgary, and then all of a sudden we have a failed attempt or a geo-block event in Nigeria. And so that brings that to my attention, and we can act on that. So I'm pretty supportive of this type of technology, and I think it's really important to have your IT staff get familiar with this portal.
Yeah, I'd just once again like to piggyback what you mentioned there, especially for a small organization that maybe doesn't have a large IT footprint. It's great to have really an IT operations center in a box just through this one subscription. Absolutely.
We're also looking at further leveraging it using Azure Advanced Threat Protection licensing and potentially monitoring our on-prem enterprise applications, so we have centralized logging in one spot. Microsoft Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection. So for us, as we were going into this project, our third-party software endpoint protection or antivirus solution was coming up in terms of its subscription. So we decided to go with the Microsoft Defender ATP solution, and we're finding it's a great solution. We get centralized alerts, threats, vulnerability management. We can look at a client computer and determine what third-party software has CVEs or common vulnerability exposure, and we can act on that. So it might be time to update, Adobe Acrobat, that sort of thing. So the endpoint detection and response was, again, part of our A5 licensing. We purchased that in all of our Office 365 licensing through ARC Business Solutions. So here's our lessons learned. So really for us, it's going to be the project approach of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, starting with the initial setup of the tenant and moving email services and fully leveraging those collaboration tools wherever we can. Also, Microsoft Teams is not a one-stop shop yet. Improvements to the modern file experience is coming, and shared calendars is also coming. Expect change management challenges. It's a digital transformation that we're talking about here today. And so you're going to encounter change management challenges. For us, it's really just the adoption of these other tools that our customers are just new to. And so for us, this has actually gone really well. Engage key stakeholders early on and communicate them throughout. For us, a lot of that was the champions at Communication Services. It's really important that we have champions that are able to get the messaging out for us and really champion the project through. And then finally, plan and adopt a security strategy for configuration and security operations in Office 365. I can't emphasize that enough to make sure that before you start turning on the functionality, before you start configuring, you understand what your security objectives are and how you're supposed to align your procedures and your configurations to a security framework.
All right, we're pretty much bang on to the 45 minutes. Thanks, Zeke and Steph, for the overview of the project and the lessons learned. So we wanted to kind of turn this into some questions and answers now. So we've got a number of questions from the audience here. So I guess maybe, Zeke, I'll send this one your way. So with Office 365, does an organization need SharePoint for collaboration?
Well, that's a unique question. So with Office 365, you kind of just get SharePoint. You can choose whether or not to use it for information and records management. If you don't already have anything in place, though, I do highly recommend it. It is definitely best in breed for those functions, including a lot of the things we haven't yet mentioned, the ways in which you can extend the platform to third-party integrations, the best in breed search functionality available within the product. And also, if you plan on rolling out Teams, unbeknownst to you or maybe your staff, you get SharePoint anyways. Behind the scenes, a SharePoint online site is actually powering the files experience within each team that you create.
Awesome. Thank you. Here's another question. I'll send this to Zeke as well. So OneDrive is recommended for storage of documents for a single user. Shouldn't the organization store all documents in SharePoint?
No, definitely not necessarily. Think of OneDrive or OneDrive for Business, as sort of a cloud-based extension of your documents and downloads and desktop files on your workstation. You can also use it as really a sandbox to start drafting documents that you aren't yet ready for external collaborators or other team members to consume. You do have 1 terabyte of storage for each individual in your organization, so they definitely don't have to worry about filling that up.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Actually, I'm going to pose this question to both you guys. So what is the difference between M365 licensing and Office 365 licensing?
Ooh, another good one. And that probably came up because we sort of mentioned both interchangeably throughout the presentation. Microsoft 365 is a relatively new offering from Microsoft. Basically, they took the Office 365 offering and then tagged on a few extras that typically you'd have to pay additional a la carte for. That includes Windows 10, so your operating system, and mobile device management, to name a couple, through Intune. And one of the key reasons they did this is they recognized that they were onboarding a lot of brand new businesses that were completely greenfield. They had no desktops provisioned, they had no infrastructure in place, no software tools for communications and collaboration. So with this one offering, you have your operating system, you have your information and records management, you have your chat, you have your telephony, you have all of that sort of in one package.
Yeah, for the Real Estate Council of Alberta, a lot of it had to do with the features you get with Azure Active Directory Premium 2. So when we were talking about Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection, that is part of the Microsoft 365 A5 licensing. Also, the Azure Advanced Threat Protection, just that whole suite, including Cloud App Security, was really key for us, and that's why we went with Microsoft or M365 licensing.
Okay, I think I'm going to pose this question to Stefan. I think we know the answer, but so why did RECA choose ARC Business Solutions as your implementation provider for the Office 365 project?
Well, I mentioned that it's about people, process, and technology in that order, basically. So for us, it was about people, and ARC really was the best fit in terms of augmenting and collaborating with our team. They brought the right expertise to the table, and it just made a lot of sense for RECA to select ARC in the vendor selection.
Okay, so here's actually another great question. Actually, Stefan, I'll send this your way. So for migrating mailboxes, did you have to be at or under a specific size?
Just kind of remembering, Kelly Kerr was one of the consultants on board. I know that one of our bigger mailboxes, as I recall, was about 50 gigabytes. And so the way you do the mailbox migration is you stage it. So you basically set it up in a batch job, you send it out to the cloud, and then once it is ready to go and you've worked with your customer there, you can you can press the button, it does the final deltas, and then it's really magical because Outlook just goes, okay, yeah, now I'm connected to the cloud. So that 40 gigabyte mailbox, I think 40 to 50 gigabytes was about a day based on our internet connection, which is about 50 megabits upload speed.
Yeah, just to tag on to that, typically that migration is really just going to be a function of your own bandwidth and time. One thing I want to highlight, before you're migrating anything, regardless of whether it's content on on-premises file stores or your Exchange mailboxes, initiate a cleanup effort first and foremost, right? Have people go through their closets and Marie Kondo their old emails.
Okay, so we've got a lot of questions here. This is fantastic. I'm actually going to direct this to Zeke. So we're trying to follow a similar phase cycle, but just with the pilot of Teams with a group of 65 staff. What we are finding is the records management piece in place before we can allow the file sharing and uploading of files into Teams, because we don't have that in place yet. But I'm worried about losing user excitement and adoption. Do you have any recommendations?
Ooh, that is a multi-part question. Top of mind, I'm already starting the solution. There are a few ways we could tackle that one. First and foremost, it depends on how in-depth you need that RM capability. Are you actually wanting to apply labels to documents as they're being uploaded? Do you already have an RM policy in place where you've defined what those record buckets look like and what those retention schedules should look like? Or are you simply wanting to tag and classify documents as they enter the new system? If it's the latter, what you can do is actually something I actually recommended as a stopgap when we were discussing the files experience in Teams. On the underlying SharePoint Online site, you can configure, and this is actually something that's been available in SharePoint products for a while now, you can configure the automatic application of metadata to specific folders. So if you have a folder structure already in place that sort of mimics that taxonomy and perhaps even mimics some of those retention buckets, you can tell SharePoint to automatically set those fields as users upload documents into the Files tab on Teams. And then down the road, when you're actually ready to apply those RM labels and policies, you can then target those documents based on the metadata that's already been set.
I'd like to add to that. I think it's a good idea to add, you have different tabs in Teams. And so what you could do is set up a website tab to point to a SharePoint library so that when you have your staff in Microsoft Teams, they have a tab for specifically the records management component. I can tell you what we do is we do sync our SharePoint document libraries. And so we're using that Explorer view again through the OneDrive for Business capability. And we still have that records management piece there as well.
Okay, we have another question here. I'll actually pose it to both of you guys. Did you apply the same information management approach to OneDrive and Exchange?
Good question. I don't know if I fully understand it. For us, it really, for the mailbox migration, it was really just moving our staff mailboxes out into Office 365 natively. And in terms of records or files going into the solution, right now we're kind of piloting it, I guess, at the moment. We've kind of stuck with one content type throughout the tenant space. And so we will be looking at really getting into more of the document sciences, the taxonomy, developing different content types and mimicking information security classification as part of that.
Yeah. With regards to OneDrive specifically, because this one's a lot newer than email management, which is a process a lot of our organizations have had to go through in terms of RM with emails. I'd say adopt maybe a better safe than sorry approach when it comes to OneDrive specifically, but that's going to depend on how you've configured OneDrive. Have you enabled external sharing? to whitelisted domains or to all domains, what type of content is being stored in OneDrive. You can use the security compliance reports to determine are people storing and sharing personally identifiable information, social insurance numbers, credit cards through their OneDrive. In that case, then yeah, maybe you do want to adopt a more aggressive RM strategy with files in OneDrive. And you can apply the same thing to email. The reason I don't want to emphasize email too much is because email management is something that's already been near and dear to a lot of us, even before Office 365.
Okay, so one of the last questions we've got here is the slideshow available, and would you email it or make it accessible? Absolutely. So this presentation is being recorded, so we will present this back on the ARC Business Solutions website. It'll also be on YouTube probably within the next week or so. But you see my email on the slide. Please email me with additional questions that you may have, or reach out for the slide deck as well. We absolutely appreciate Stefan with RECA joining us here today. It was a great presentation, and more importantly, a great project that was completed. And thank you to Zeke for his input as well. And again, if there's any additional questions, please reach out to me, mdenowden@arcbus.com, and look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you, everyone.